Everybody, you're watching The Breakfast Show here on Sky News Tuesday morning. Pleased to say that the Defence Secretary John Healey is joining us now. Hello to you, Defence Secretary. I know you've got a busy day, so we'll keep it short and sweet. Why have you decided now is the time to impose a partial ban on export licences to Israel?
Because this is a government that has a duty to the rule of law, faced with the conflict in Gaza. It's our legal responsibility and obligation to review export licenses. It's what we said we'd do in opposition. That process was complete and reported to Parliament yesterday by the Foreign Secretary. What
legal advice were you given?
The judgment was whether there is a clear risk that anything we supply from this country could be linked to a serious violation of international humanitarian law. And the assessment was that in the case of around 30 components for military equipment, this was the case. And so just as governments have done in the past, from Margaret Thatcher to Gordon Brown, we've suspended the export licenses on those components and not affected any of the 300 plus other exports that we put into Israel that may be used for defensive purposes or things that are nothing to do with the conflict.
OK. Will you be publishing your legal advice?
We published yesterday, in an unprecedented step, not the full legal advice, but the summary and the recommendations of the legal process. And the Foreign Secretary confirmed that yesterday in the House of Commons.
Because, as you know, when he was Shadow Foreign Secretary, he put a lot of pressure on the then government to publish the government's legal advice. Do you not think that that's also what you should potentially be doing?
He did, and he did what he was able to do yesterday. It's more information than a government has published in the past. It helps people, I hope, understand the process more clearly. This is a process that is following a legal system that's been in place for some years now, and it's one of the toughest export licensing regimes that exist in the world.
Has a blanket ban been considered for now?
There's no blanket ban. There's no arms embargo. This is a question item by item, license by license. Is there a risk, and this is the process we're obliged to follow, is there a clear risk that its use in Gaza could be linked to violations of international humanitarian law? And that was the conclusion of the process. 30 out of around 350 export licenses have therefore been suspended with immediate effect. Margaret Thatcher did it in the 1980s. Gordon Brown did it in 2009. And in both cases, when there was a ceasefire, those suspensions were lifted. And that's the bigger argument here. In the end, this conflict, the concerns that people have, will be settled with an immediate ceasefire. That's what David Lammy, as Foreign Secretary, and I have both been in the region together and separately, arguing for, pressing for, because that's the way we release the hostages, that's the way that we get aid into Gaza, that's the way that we pave a longer-term path to a lasting peace in the region.
Is that the criteria, a ceasefire, for that ban to be lifted?
No, if there is a change in the conflict in Gaza, where these components are no longer a risk that international humanitarian law may be breached, then these licenses may be reviewed and those suspensions may be lifted.
Sure.
My point about the ceasefire is that that's what we're working for. That's what we've argued for more than 6 months, led the arguments in the UK, worked behind the scenes in opposition and in government to try and reinforce the case for allies to get that ceasefire in place.
How heavy is your heart, knowing, you might be able to see the pictures on the screen, you might not, knowing that licenses that were issued in the UK for weapons from the UK going to Israel could have intensified the suffering of people in Gaza?
Well, that's what has triggered this legal review process. It's the reason where there is a demonstrable connection and a clear risk that we've taken the step to suspend the licenses. But to be clear, this is not just a question of the legal process we follow, but it's a question of the bigger efforts, the new push for peace that Keir Starmer had promised in opposition that we would help lead in government. And that's why both the Foreign Secretary and I have been in the region. It's why we've had the conversations from Lebanon to Qatar. It's why I visited Israel as well in recent weeks. We're making the same arguments, trying to reinforce the chance for peace at this stage.
Okay. Okay. I know that you're meeting with your Ukrainian counterpart today. Ukraine has urged the arrest of President Putin in Mongolia. Is that something that the British government would support?
Now, the purpose of my discussions and welcoming the Defence Minister to London again today will be to discuss further the UK support that we can give to Ukraine as it fights its defensive battle against Putin's illegal invasion of its country and its threat to its very future and sovereignty.
No, I understand that, but my question is, would you support Ukraine's attempts to have President Putin arrested in Mongolia, a country that is part of the ICC, of course?
Well, we've made clear, and I'm actually proud of the way that the UK stands united for Ukraine, has done from the start, continues to do now, united in support for Ukraine, our determination to confront Russian aggression, and in the long run also to pursue Putin for his war crimes.
OK. And if I were to ask you a third time, would you give me a straight answer?
I expect the discussions to focus on Ukraine's battle here and now, the critical moments, the UK support that we can offer, the encouragement we can give to allies to do more as well. And make no mistake, Putin will have to answer for his war crimes. We have backed the setting up of a special court to be able to deal with what we've seen and the responsibility that Putin and his top generals have for this.
OK. And before I let you go, a domestic issue. We know that your boss has weighed in on the dynamic pricing for the Oasis tickets. It might not be illegal, but is it immoral?
Well, it may be distorting the market, and that's why we've said, look, we've got a review of resale practices. Given the experience that people have complained about in trying to get these Oasis tickets and this mechanism of dynamic pricing, that will include that in the review. That seems to be the right step to do.
The band could say, you know what, don't do this, as has Taylor Swift, Ed Sheeran, people like that. Would you appeal directly to the band?
I think it's a question really that needs to be looked at. Are people being ripped off by this? And that's the problem with particularly resale of tickets, which the government started to review of. And given the level of dissatisfaction and complaint, the feeling that people have been unfairly treated, makes sense to include that in the review, which is what the government said it'll do.
Are you a fan?
Well, I am, but I'm actually a bit too busy to start applying for tickets or even go to concerts at the moment. But look, good luck to those who've managed to get the tickets. I know they'll have a great time. OK, good to talk to you. Busy day, as I said. I will let you go. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Defence Secretary.